The 12-inch PowerBook G4, first introduced to the world in 2003, and it would mark Apple's return to the sub-notebook market. Even thinner and smaller than Apple's own current model iBooks, a truly impressive machine for its time. These sleek and powerful devices would truly define the behemoth's vision of a premium, ultra-portable notebook. Unfortunately, with the upcoming transition to Intel, the 12-inch model would be dropped altogether. It wouldn't be until 2008, with the introduction of the MacBook Air, and later on the slightly larger unibody models, that Apple would have another stab at the sub-notebook market. Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Mark here. Today we're going to take a look at my PowerBook G4. It's the 12-inch model with the 1.33 GHz CPU, and I wanted to see if we could put a more modern operating system on this. Right now it's running the latest available system from Apple, which was over a decade ago, and that was 10.5 Leopard. With that, we're very limited in browser support, software support, really anything. There is a lot of great legacy software, but it's not really secure or modern and up to date, so I just wanted to take a look and see what we can do, and if there's a modern Linux distro we could check out. So we're going to move on over to my desktop now and take a look at Adelie Linux. So here I've got Adelie Linux pulled up on my computer, and before I move on, I just wanted to say why. I chose Adelie mainly because it is one of the very few choices left for Linux on these old Macs. With Void potentially dropping repositories coming up soon, it is kind of archaic and somewhat limited in software, but it seems hopeful anyways for the old PowerPC hardware. Now we're going to click download and select PowerPC for our architecture. Our platform is desktop. Lastly, KDE for our environment. Let's get this downloaded and burn to a disk. I'll speed through this and meet you back after. Alright everyone. Here's our disk with Adelie Linux for PowerPC 32-bit, ready to pop in the laptop and see if we can get this installation booted. It's showing our CD-ROM we burnt right here, so let's go ahead and get this selected. Alright, and we're going to boot into Adelie Linux Live right here. Now that we're booted into our live disk and we're in the KDE desktop environment, let's go ahead and launch a terminal. There we go. I'm going to open up console. Now that we've got a terminal open, there's just a few things we need to do as root here. So let's log in as SU, and then the password will be live. Now let's run lsbok, list our disk out, and as you can see, our main hard drive is listed as disk SDA. So next we're going to run mac-fdisk and dev sda. Let's try that again. Alright, so first we're going to do is just hit P and print out our partitions there. Now I've already played around with this disk a bit. I have tried to install Adelie already just to test this out after a few headaches. And I've got some old OS X installations as well as another Linux distro I've been playing around with. For what we're going to need though, these bottom three partitions, SDA 8, 9, and 10, those are the three I want to use. We need 100 megs for our boot partition. I decided let's go ahead and have a swap partition and then our root file system right there. So to walk you through this, first we're going to hit the D key and we're going to delete the 8th partition. Alright, and as you can see now, it's listed as Apple Free Extra. It printed that above for us automatically. Next, the big C. First block will be 8P for the 8th partition. And we could normally do 8P to just take the whole space, or to show you guys, 100M. We're going to name this boot and Apple_bootstrap. That'll make our boot partition right there. So as we print that out again, you can see we've got our boot partition. I'm going to leave the swap alone, but let's delete the root file system partition right here. Now C, 10P, 10P again to use the whole space. And we're going to call this PowerBook G4 HD. Let's print that again just to be sure. We're all good here, so let's go ahead and click W for write. Yes. And we'll give this just a moment. So that's all done. We're going to go ahead and just quit out of this. I did get slightly ahead of myself, but please take note of the partition numbers that you are actually going to use. So next run make file system, HFS, and then SDA8 right there. And that's going to be our HFS system for our boot partition. And then we're going to run make swap. And that'll be SDA9. And lastly, we've got our ext4 partition, which will be SDA10, and that's our root file system. We're going to proceed anyway, and that's just because I've already set this up and mounted it previously. So the next step, make sure your time and date are correct before you run the installer, or you won't be able to successfully connect to the internet. So I've run the date command and verified that our time and date is correct. Normally, if you have any issues, you would just run date s, and then for example yesterday's date, and then we'll just put 12/01/00, and you would just click enter, and that would set your time and date. The next thing we need to do is just boot into our graphical installation. We do have to do this through the command line as root because for some reason when you just click it through the menus it's lacking permissions. So Horizon UI and enter. Welcome to Adelie Linux. Here we've got our installer. We're going to go ahead and just click continue. It just wants us to select our keyboard layout, and for me it is US, so again continue. Yes, we do want to load firmware. And here select the disk and then click continue. Go ahead and select use existing partition. Now we're going to go ahead and click continue and set our mount points for what we just created. So SDA8 is going to be our boot partition. So just add boot there, make sure you don't click format. The partition type selected does not matter since we're not formatting this again. And SDA10, we'll leave that for root and click confirm. We're not going to add our swap in here, but let's click continue. So we know our clock is correct. I'm going to try automatic. Awesome, we're successfully connected to the internet. Continue again. And our date and time is correct, but let's go ahead and put our time zone, which would be New York Eastern Standard. Now I'm going to give the computer a name here. I'm going to call this PowerBook G4 12. Now it's really important, on the software selection, select text only. I've tried standard and compact with nothing but issues on software failures, so just stick with the text only and we'll add our GUI later. We'll click continue now. Yes, we want to install a bootloader on that partition we made. Now set your root password. Next. Here I'm just going to make a user account. So Mark and our password. Continue again. Now everything here looks completely fine. Next step is just to click install. And I'm going to speed up through this installation for you. I'll meet you guys back at the end of it. Alright, so our installation finished in a matter of minutes. So for us, we're also going to click finish. There's nothing really to touch up here, at least that I need to do right now. So the next thing we're going to do is just type in reboot now and enter. Now it's really important as soon as you hear the boot chime, Command Option OF, go ahead and hold that so we can get into open firmware and actually boot from our new Adelie installation. Now here we're just going to run one command. It's going to be set environment, boot device, and then we're going to do HD8 since that is our boot partition there, and then comma, /grub, /grub. Okay, and boot. Awesome, there's our grub bootloader for Adelie Linux right here. Alright, so I've logged in as root here. First thing we're going to do is just run apk update. Just make sure everything is actually up to date there. Now after this, there's going to be a few extra commands I invoke because right now this is just going to give us the bare minimum desktop environment. No console, no software, no nothing at all. So right now this will just give us Plasma in our display manager as well as console, which I should add from here. You can go ahead and add a few more commands after this, but they'll be posted down below in the description. Alright, so I've gone ahead and I've installed most of the KDE add-ons and bloat there, so we at least have a more complete package. Just a few last things I wanted to go ahead and add. These few last little bits here. Now, this third piece is really crucial because this is the only way we're actually going to have mouse and keyboard support. So, click enter. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, just to make this a little easier on yourself as well, is just use the command sddm. And go ahead and launch our display manager. And as you can see, here we've got our login screen, and it's going to go into the Plasma desktop session. Now note, Wayland does not work. Let's get logged in. And I just wanted to verify that we actually have our console and all of our software in here before I set this as the default option to launch. So let's get root permissions next. And I'm not sure why we have the garbled text in our terminal, but everything works just fine. We're going to run rc update, add sddm, default. Now it should log into sddm and KDE as our default. I would prefer to run xfce, but I still could never get a successful environment. So I've given up and I've just defaulted to KDE for now. One last thing to update. I tried Firefox and NetSurf. I also tried getting WebKit to work and I had no luck with that either. So we're going to just go ahead and add a CLI browser right now. So apk add w3m. Let's just try apple.com. Here we've got our Apple website. We can just use page up and page down. It works fine. All links are still clickable. Well, let's see. Let's just take a look. Let's learn more about the iPad Air. And you can see it loaded and everything now. And a picture of the iPad Air right there. So this may just be a command line text-based browser, but it's pretty quick and lightweight. So at least if you need to do some type of browsing, it will be somewhat usable on this computer. Gone ahead and I've loaded up Reddit. It's not very usable at all. You get a few images, a lot of broken formatting. Can't really tell what's going on. I've got an archived article pulled up here now. Let's take a look and see if we can actually view this. So it looks like we've got our introduction right there, followed by the rest of our article and all the pages right here. So let's just make sure the next page works. I've got nothing else really to say about web browsing on this machine. Alright, and we've got Calligra Words launched now. It's definitely supposed to be a word replacement software. And it reminds me a lot of Apple Pages, to be honest with you. The way all the tools are on the right side there. It seems from first glance this is probably a pretty decent piece of software, but I just wanted to see what we had and if it even worked. Yeah, everything's pretty self-explanatory. This actually looks like a really user-friendly piece of software as well. Now, I've gone ahead and I've gone back and added the Kde Games Package on here. So let's just see if anything will work. Pac-Man clone, let's see what happens. So the controls are not very responsive, but at the same time, it's much faster paced and a lot smoother to play. And I died. So the responsiveness is a little wonky on this, but overall, it's totally playable. There's a little stutter here and there when that object just popped up, and when I died, but overall, it's playing just fine. So let's move on. Got our PowerBook G4 12-inch, 1.33 GHz PowerPC G4, and 1.25 gigs of RAM. Now, I would call this a success, maybe not a complete one. I was hoping to have a proper web browser and see what we could really do with this machine, but right now, there is hope for our old Mac computers and running a modern Linux distro still. It's time to wrap things up. I wouldn't necessarily call this machine usable, but it is nice to see a modern OS and software up and running mostly smooth on it. If you like this video, remember to click that like button, don't forget to subscribe and ding that bell so you get notified every time I release content like this in the future. Drop a comment down below if you have any ideas or suggestions for future topics, and as always, until next time.